Actually, was born and raised in southeastern Michigan in a small town of about 7,000 people. My father owned a hardware store in the town, and my mother was a stay-at-home mom and took care of her two adopted sons, which is a unique story in itself. I have no sisters. My brother and I are both adopted. One. We're both adopted from different families. Two. Anyone want to guess what the third one is? We're both gay. My friend said, wow, your parents are lucky. I'm like, yeah. I'm sure they thought that too when they both found out.
I am a huge believer in personal storytelling because I think it changes hearts and minds. It dispels myths, untruths, and it opens our hearts. And I really feel it creates change. We often live in fear of what we don't know. And a lot of it stems from when we're not sharing stories with one another and talking about who we are. Our lovely gadgets that we're hooked up to that do a lot of good for us often separate us because we're not talking about who we are. It's easier to send a text message than to sit down with somebody nowadays. So if you have the opportunity and you're hooked to your device, put it down once in a while and talk to somebody and get to know who that person is, because you may understand that our differences should be celebrated. And it's something that my teaching growing up, that our differences were always something of a negative. They're different, they're not like us, so we're not going to hang out with them. And that's not necessarily true. It's our differences that are celebrated, where we can all come together and find out actually how alike we are. I was writing a column in the Tri-City Times, our local paper, called Clowning Around, and I did like movie reviews and stuff. And then I turned the tables because I wrote about something very serious that happened to me in a health class. And it was our football player. A bunch of football players were in there, but the coach was teaching the health class. And he would cover over some sexual issues, but how to dress wounds and taking care of yourself. It was a big blow-off class, to be honest with you. But there was about 30 of us in there. And there was a young kid in there that got bullied all the time. And they brought him up to the front of the class, and the coach signified to have the door closed by one of the football players. And the football players wrapped him up, his name was Michael, wrapped him up in gauze like a mummy, because we were talking about slings and wounds and things like that. And they laid him on the floor, and everybody was laughing. I was horrified. And I knew it wasn't right. The bell rang, and the football players picked him up and stretched him across in front of the door, and to leave, you were required to walk over him, how degrading, and go out in the hallway. And I pondered about this for the longest time. I was the last one out, and I told the coach, I'm not walking over him, I'm going to move him and walk around him. He goes, oh no. He goes, do you enjoy this class? A little bit. He goes, do you want a good grade? I could not believe this was a teacher telling me this. I said, yeah, and my scores are good. I grabbed his feet and I walked out. I wrote about that in the local paper, in Clowning Around. The paper came out about 2 days later. Now, you have to understand, my parents were going through a divorce at the time, so my mom's home alone. And the day the paper came out, that afternoon, I'm downstairs in the basement working on some government thing. And my mom yells down and goes, there's a school teacher here that wants to talk to you. And I'm like, am I in trouble or something? And he comes down, it was the coach of my health class. And he came downstairs and he said, do you know why I'm here? And I said, no. He goes, I read your paper, I read your article in the paper today. I'm like, oh. And he goes, did you mean all that stuff that you said? And I just wrote what I personally thought about what happened, and it wasn't right. And he goes, do you mind like talking to the principal when you come in tomorrow and really tell him that didn't all happen? And I said, no. I go, that did happen. And again he said, do you enjoy my class? And I said, I enjoy your class. And he went, well. And it was just the weirdest situation I'd ever been in. But I felt very empowered. And I always tell people, you need to speak out when you see injustice, then be complacent, because a lot of us just walk past and let things go. And it was the first time I didn't let things go. He got in a whole lot of trouble. I stayed in the class. He was told not to treat me any differently from what I heard through the grapevine. and I ended up getting a B+ in the class and succeeded. But that was the first time I really experienced any kind of bullying. And I often tell people, we need to understand when the kids are bullied and they're in school, they're not learning. They're going from, in class, they're thinking about how am I going to get from point A to point B. So how am I going to go from my English class to my math class? And what hallway am I going to go down without being smashed against a locker, somebody saying something to me inappropriate, somebody chasing me, somebody after me, whatever the case may be, some kind of social cruelty, so I can go. And they're not learning. And we talked about policies being involved with schools and stuff. Everybody needs to be on board with that.